Committee will come to order. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are to be acknowledged and permissible. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Agia? Here. Mr. Coogan?
Here.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hetzler?
Here.
Mr. Corey?
Here.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Correa.
Here. And a salute to the flag.
To the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this evening we have one individual signed up for public input time, Elizabeth Medeiros, 1105 Bay Street, and the item is the budget.
Good evening. My name is Liz Medeiros, and I'm a 7th year special education teacher at Carlton and Viveris Elementary. In my 7 years in the district, I've seen the highs and lows of our financial struggles as a city. I've seen the difficult years where money was tight and people were pink-slipped. I've attended school committee budget meetings, city council meetings, and finance subcommittee meetings, listening to the back and forth conversation about what our students need versus what we can provide fiscally. This year, however, under Dr. Malone's guidance, we have the ability to add personnel after years of cutting or maintaining. I urge you to support the 2020 budget because, above all, it addresses our needs as a district. I know that the Finance Subcommittee, alongside members of the administration, have been working hard to analyze and discuss the recommended budget. From my perspective as a teacher, this budget meets many of our longtime needs. Anyone who has visited our schools and has talked to our teachers understands the needs of our students and staff. From the eyes of a teacher, this budget focuses on the academic needs of our schools, starting with the budget priority of a district-wide phonics program, all the way to the addition of paraprofessionals and creation of curriculum directors. This year's budget aims to provide the best possible instruction for all of the learners in our schools. For far too long, we as teachers have been tasked with providing engaging and interactive instruction with inconsistent support and consistency. By adopting a district-wide phonics program, students will receive reading instruction that is grounded in a systematic and research-based program that understands the science of learning to read. And our teachers will be provided with the materials needed to make this happen. With more paraprofessionals and support in the classrooms, teachers will be able to provide targeted small group instruction that will target the needs of all of our learners. And with the addition of curriculum directors, we'll be able to support teachers in understanding the curriculum to be taught, along with providing equity and consistency in content and material across the entire district. In a district this large, with students that have all different needs and teachers with all different levels of expertise and experience, this budget addresses what we as teachers need. As teachers, we've been asked to do more with too little. We all know the needs of our students are increasing. For the past 7 years, though, or at least since I've been here, we've been expected to meet these needs with either less or the same as the year prior. Finally, we're at a place where we can build capital and offer our students more, and that's why I'm urging all members of the committee to support this budget. Thank you.
We do not have any recognition awards at this time, so we'll go on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Doug. Today we have two quick items. The first one is really update to the committee on the turnaround work that's happening in the 5 schools in the district. Dr. Carlson and her team have been working with the site level leaders and the consultants that we hired from Teachers 21 to help project manage the writing of the turnaround plans in those 5 buildings, which is an expectation under the statute and the CMR. And those plans are coming along nicely. I think that the focus from the Department of Ed at this time, with their team supporting our team, both at the central level and at the site level, I think has been great. We do have some positive news out of Fonseca School that recently just had their monitor site visit, that the indicators that were monitored compared to last year at the same time were much improved. And we're appreciative of Principal Lisi and her team at that building for the work that they're doing. All of our teachers and support staff, our paras, everyone, FRA as well, are really pulling in the same direction, and I think that is really making the difference at this time. This year, as you know, that the new plans that are being written for Henry Lord, for Durfee, and Morton, plus Talbot, and Talbot's eligible for SRG grant, which is the same grant that Fonseca was awarded 2 years ago, so they'll be writing that as well to help them with their turnaround work. And I just know that from what I've seen, from what I've observed, and also what I've been able to engage with in terms of the process, that we are focused on all the right things to close achievement gaps and open doors for kids, and it's about support, and it's about instructional improvement, and it's about interventions, and really about making sure that all means all when we're talking about the students in the school system. So I'm happy and encouraged about where we are. We have a lot of work to go. We're going to have a lot of oversight, of course, through the department, and I can tell you that we're ready for that challenge, and we're ready to work hand in hand together with all of our entities to ensure, and with our parent entities as well, to really ensure that this is a community-wide effort to ensure that all of our schools are high-achieving and doing amazing work with kids. So that's where we are right now in the turnaround work. Secondly, we also received some good news, aside from the good news that we received at Fonseca last week, that the Durfee utilities are now hooked up. So in any large construction project, it's always the infrastructure, which takes a very long time and is always the most important to do. You got to get it right first. So the over-excavation is almost complete. And we've hooked up gas, electrical, sewer, and water, of course, and fiber now. So what I mean by hooked up, it's been all taken up from the street and under the ground, piped in and poured and hooked up, and so that now we will start the foundation work. And I believe there's something like 600 piers. And piers are about 4 to 5 feet structures that go down into the ground, and the foundation will sit on top of these concrete piers. So that is the next phase of the construction. Granted, we had a mild winter. We were able to move fast. I think Suffolk has been outstanding. They did what they said they were going to do. They hired local subcontractors. Resendes came in, did a great job, continuing to do that job. It looks amazing. You can see the grade right now when you drive by, and when you come up to the field house and the football field, you see how this school is going to wrap right around. I mean, this is going to be the most beautiful thing to be built in Fall River and in a little while, and for some time. I think this is a real testament to the teamwork in the city that we displayed this past year to get the vote, and then to ensure that we are good stewards of the public dollar. We have the best construction management team working every day. Matt Damaris and his team is outstanding. Kenny and his crew also outstanding. And our architects are just really very impressed with how engaging they are with our faculty and staff to be able to say, here's what we're thinking, what are you thinking? And then taking those ideas and incorporating them into the design. So that's where we are, and we're just going to keep going, and I'll look forward to a next status update as the construction begins, or as the concrete begins to be poured.
Thank you. Okay, next is the student comment.
Question on that?
Mr. Aguirre?
So, Dr. Malone, I just had two quick questions. The first one on the turnaround work. I know we received something in the package relative to it seemed to me like a walkthrough. You know, people were walking through to where they rated them, the state folks. When do they give actual assessment data that can be used to show growth and stuff? Is that throughout the year? Is it quarterly, monthly? And
So the assessment, well, the state assessment data will be this fall. But in terms of what we're tracking at Fonseca specifically, we're doing quarterly benchmarking with the ANET system. So we're able to track where the students are every 3 months? And we're able to then say where the growth is. And if you visit the Fonseca school, they've posted all these data points up on their wall so you can get a good sense of where they are with their benchmarks. But the formative accountability data, or the summative accountability data that the state will use to make a decision whether we move out of status or not this coming year, but it will be the following year, That will happen this fall.
Yep. So related to all of the 5 schools, do they all do quarterly benchmark assessment data?
So-
And how can we get a copy of that?
Talbot, well, that's a good question. Talbot, Henry Lord, I'll bring Julie up. Talbot, Henry Lord, and hopefully soon to be Durfee because of this budget, because we're putting that in the budget as well for Durfee. We'll be able to have that system in place to do that.
So all of our schools have school improvement plans in which they worked on for the last 2 years that outline their 4 main goals in which they want to grow in. ELA and math and science are part of those plans. For our turnaround schools, we have 4 that are using ANET, and then the rest we do on a 3 times a year basis. We used MCAS as our baseline assessment in order to change and make benchmark goals. And then we did a mid-year, which happened in October, which was a full district benchmark assessment that looked at the different standards. We did a whole review with all of our principals. We broke it down with our department heads and then down to the teacher level. And then we just finished our last benchmark assessment. The whole district did the same process where we gave 1 assessment, and then we went through our district level, reviewing all of the assessment data all the way down to the teacher level again.
So I guess that's my point, my question or suggestion is if each school is doing that type of assessment work, you know where the children were the prior year from MCAS or whatever the standardized test that you gave. Then this year, they either show growth up or down or stagnant. We, the school committee, haven't received any of that data is what I'm asking. So
It
if we
is
can,
not
without getting
consistent.
just a package of stuff, to say, I want to say, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the thing that came out recently was just, I think the group from the state came down and they walked through and said who's, are the kids more engaged, this and that, and they kind of give a scoring sheet. But as I was looking at that, I was wondering where is the assessment data to sort of back that up?
So they came to do a qualitative analysis. So the qualitative analysis is based on a framework that they use when they look and ask questions. What you're looking for is a dashboard, a data point for where these schools are in the work that we're measuring across the district. We can provide that. It's a question of, do you want that to be something I mail home to the committee, or do you want a presentation at the school committee on that?
I would just personally like to see a brief summary sent to the committee. So for instance, you said 4 schools are ANET, or whatever the company is that we're going to be using, potentially, and then I see some other things maybe expanding, which I'm not opposed to. I actually think we should do that across the whole district. But we are not getting the data per se, so that a month from now, when we're going to have to take a vote as a body to say, should we do this across the whole district, you can show us all of the great detail that these teachers are getting and the staff is getting to drive instruction. I think it's something that you have, and you might internally do it.
Yeah.
But if you can show that to us, it'll give us a little more, because you could tell me right now whether the students are your best guess, it's not automatic, whether they're going to make progress on MCAS or not. You can, in education, you can kind of take a good shot at it, or you can say our scores are flat and the kids aren't growing. That's the kind of stuff that I would be asking for. If we can get that to the whole committee, I think it'll be valuable.
We'll get in a Friday mailing either this Friday or next.
Great. And I just had one other question, not on this. On the Durfee construction, I know we've spoken in the past about the baseball field not being in the original plan, and I think we talked about at the end maybe coming up with something. I'm just looking to see if we can either get an update here or in the Friday update relative to what's going to happen, because I, for one, am a proponent of the baseball field being brand new like the rest of the place.
Right.
And if it's not, maybe we have to do some other things with funding that we have, one-time funds, things like
Right.
that. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you can either get us something on a Friday.
Yeah, I'll put some on Friday.
Sure,
But
thanks.
I mean, I can also answer your question this way. We at least know right now and can guarantee that because of the water reclamation work that we did in that whole entire area as part of the project now, that baseball field will be drier this year than it has been in the past. Now, it's still going to be wet. What you're looking for, and what I think pretty much everyone in the district can agree to, is that the original design of that field is at a gradation that's too low so that the water table has too much high of an impact on it. And if we could get it raised and perhaps turf it, we wouldn't have any problems ever. And so that's something that we're looking at. But we said it would be at the end of the project if there was money left over for the committee to make those decisions. we can't make those decisions now because we're not far enough along in the project to know if there's going to be any flexibility within that budget. So I can give you a total cost of what it is and where we are and that kind of thing, and we can send that to you on Friday as well.
Yeah, my concern is just to get it, and let's say it costs $250,000. I think the bid came in, or whatever the thing you gave said 350 or 400,000.
Yeah, it's going to be,
But
yeah,
as
a
the
little bit
committee
more.
here start discussing funding for things, I think that's an important piece of an investment in that school. So
Yeah.
as we're going, instead of spending all the money that we currently have, maybe we put some money in a reserve account for such a thing as if the contingency of the project doesn't go, do we have our own contingency to try and?
Right.
There really is no reason why, and I think you agree, we shouldn't have all the fields brand new, turfed and everything, but the baseball field's old and crappy. I don't think that's what you want or anybody wants.
No.
And I'm just trying to bring that out, that we need to definitely have this on our radar, because that should be something that we do.
Yeah, I mean, this has never come off our radar. We use it's like a 100-mile-an-hour pitch. I got that targeted, and I know where it is.
All right, sounds good, thank you, I yield.
All right.
Next is the student delegation report. Not here. It's not here tonight, so the next one. Next is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion? Motion's been made. Is there a second? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan? Yes. Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Number of travel requests. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been moved to approve. There's a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. There are a number of donations to be approved and accepted. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes.
I have a question on this.
On the donations?
On donations, yeah. On the first one in regard to the Michael Troy Foundation, could I get contact information on that? Would that be possible?
Yeah.
Thank you. I yield.
All right, Superintendent, can you read the
Sure.
donations, please?
So, from the Michael Troy Memorial Foundation to the Durfee High School Fine Arts Department, $5,000. From Google Friends and Family to Durham Community School, $2,382. From Donors Choose to Durfee High School Fine Arts Department, $691.94. From Donors Choose to Fonseca Elementary School, $405.94. From Donors Choose to Durfee High School Fine Arts Program, $196. From All Goods LLC to Durfee High School Athletics, $88.50. From Ohio Ply Prince Inc. to Durfee High School, $63.99. From Pell Industries Inc. to Durfee High School, $45.51. From K-12 Learning to Durfee Athletic Department, $26.79. And then from the Last Shadows Motorcycle Organization to the Fonseca Elementary School, 100 winter coats, hats, gloves, and scarves. We thank our donors for recognizing the needs in the school system.
Thank you. We have a number of contracts. Are there questions on any of the contracts? No questions? Is there a question, Mr. Aguirre?
So the second one down, the Walker Consulting, what is the scope of that? I see what it says in the description. Is there a specific scope for that work?
This is the program audit that,
Yeah.
yeah,
Is there a scope to that? Or-
what do you mean by scope? So they're going to
What I
come
mean
in?
is like, what are they going to deliver to us?
A formal proposal that they put in, and it's going to include all the programs that we have and make recommendations about how we can build more programs to save from out-of-district placements and where we are with some of those
Is it going to do,
things.
is it going to assess this current programs and see whether they're viable or
All of
not, or
them,
whether they're
yeah.
lousy or not, or good, you know?
We don't have lousy programs, but
I'm
we're
just
gonna-
saying, like, are they going to weigh in as an independent person?
Yes. So this is going.
So it's a full scope, it's not
this
just,
is a
they're not
full
coming in
s-
to get 25
no.
grand to do nothing.
This is a, no, this is a full scope audit.
And we should expect some real
We will-
solid,
Yes, and this is why we hired this group. They're the best in the business on this. This is going to be a nice one.
And they'll give us recommendations, and then those
Solid
recommendations will be
recommendations for us
followed
to
in the
move
future
forward.
accordingly. Thank you. Can we just get that sent to us? I'm going to approve this. I think it's needed, but if you can send us what their proposal was, appreciate it. Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Corey?
Dr. Malone, is that also going to take in a look at the bridge program?
So, yeah, so I mean, I want to be real clear with everyone. Internally, we're already looking at the bridge program, and we have ideas about how we have to improve that delivery of service, both the therapeutic side and the behavioral side, and how historically the bridge has become one umbrella for both of those things, which are technically two separate needs. And you know that, coming from the SEL world. So we're right now identifying how we can, for lack of a better term, blow up the bridge to make the program much more engaging and supportive, and then figure out, right now the bridge is down to 25 kids. And what we have 2 years ago, we're up at 48. I mean, I think a lot of that has to do with growth at Stone with the high school program, and then also growth at RPA. So we're working on that, and this audit will include a big piece of looking at the behavioral programs and placements, as well as the therapeutic.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Good, okay, is there a motion to approve all contracts?
So moved.
Motion has been made, is there a second to approve all contracts?
Second?
Seconded, roll call. This is to approve all contracts.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. We have one grant for approval this evening. Questions, comments on the grant?
So moved.
Second.
Point of order. Could you speak directly into the mics? These are unidirectional mics, and when you turn your head, I know it's polite to look at who you're speaking with, but difficulty here.
Okay. You have a question on this grant, Mr. Martins?
And we're on grants now?
Yes.
Okay. I have a concern about the grant for disabilities, enhanced programs for students with disabilities. My question is, when is the SPED teacher support for the students with IEPs going to take place? In other words, what time of the day?
Well, that would be within the regular day.
I'm sorry?
That would be within the regular day, Mr. Martins, because
In the
these are
regular day.
non-ELT schools.
Then why are people being paid a stipend if it's during a regular day and they are being paid?
Okay, it's the delivery of
you know-
service, but I think we're also looking at enriching the
Say-
after-school. I think we're also looking at enriching the after-school program to enable those special ed students to have access to it. So then we would be paying stipends for some special educators to work in that program as well.
The after-school program is already funded.
Right, but access, Mr. Martins, we're talking about very specific special education needs.
So
These
that-
aren't learning disabilities that we're talking about. This is, what's the term? Profound?
So this would also be for our students who have gross and fine motor skills that are profound disabilities, that they have equal access to after-school 21st century extended learning opportunities they would not have if it was just with one educator who was not trained professionally in those certain content areas and the needs of our students with disabilities.
So these people that are involved with receiving an additional stipend, without this, they wouldn't be doing anything.
Well, students would not have individualized access to the extended learning opportunities because they would not have the professionals that could teach and support their learning in the after and extended programs. So these are professionals that are trained and working with students with disabilities.
I guess what I'm driving at, are they being paid twice?
No, this is an extended, this is beyond their normal workday.
Okay, but But in that time of beyond the normal work day, which I agree that if somebody works beyond the normal school day, they should be compensated. I agree with that. But in that time, there are, you know, where is this going to fit if they're already compensated via the extended learning time monies?
So many of our schools have what we call 21st century programming, which is the school day ends, for example, at 2:30, and from 2:30 to 3:30, they have enrichment activities. So this would be to provide stipends to special educators in order to create equitable access to students with disabilities, to be able to engage in those activities.
So they're going, this is like an extended time to the extended school day, what you're saying?
I don't understand your question.
I'm just trying to find out when time are the students, I mean, the teachers are going to be involved with these
It's after
students.
school's done.
After the end of the day, Mr. Martins.
I'm sorry?
After the end of the day.
Okay.
So if you have a
After the end
child,
of the day is extended learning time.
yes,
Are these people being paid now for the extended learning time?
no, because they don't work there. What we're trying to do is create access so that kids with profound learning disabilities could participate in learning activities in the extended day program. And that these professionals are the only ones that can provide those services because they're trained to provide them. So this is a 21st century grant, Mr. Martins, from the state to support that.
At Green and Talbot.
I believe in the health.
What?
Do I still have the floor?
Yes, you do.
And Mr. Martins, these are not ELT schools. Green and I believe it's Talbot are not ELT schools. So their school day ends, and then this is the 21st century grant picks up to provide enrichment activities. They're non-ELT schools. So their teachers are not receiving stipends for ELT because they're not ELT schools currently.
So the Green and Talbot are not ELT schools?
Yes, correct.
Okay, of which case then this is going beyond their normal school time, right, in there, and then the teachers involved are being compensated with this stipend,
Yes.
and there's no other further funding for that. They're not being,
There is not.
not, I yield. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Motion to approve has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, we have our discussion item number one is a discussion and first read of the 2019-2020 school year instructional calendar. Questions, comments?
Good question.
Mr. Exler?
Did somebody count this year? It won't be like last year. We won't have to redo this. Good to go.
So it's gone before everyone a number of times. We've counted and recounted, so if, hopefully we won't have any mistakes.
If you look now on the 12-month calendar, you can see how we counted each of the days, so we have another check, because you're right, we didn't want to mess up that professional development day again. So we have the accurate, and we also included all the data from the surveys that we did around the start of the school year. Tonight's the first read, to lay it on the table. Figure there'd be questions tonight or questions next month, and then vote on it at the next meeting.
You yield? Okay. Other questions? Mr. Coogan?
I'll make a motion to approve this as long as Matt didn't count it. Did Matt count it? I want to know if Matt counted the days.
He absolutely did.
Malone.
Which Matt is he talking about?
Matt Malone.
I didn't count it the last time. I took the heat for it, though. That's what
I'll
we used
yield.
to do.
I'll yield.
It's all my fault.
Mr. Corey?
Dr. Carlson, I just want to know, as far as the staff results from the survey, in regard to the FREA, it looks like they voted in favor. Is that 254 to 208? Was that the final number?
It was. I worked with Mr. Coogan, who informed me that the vote was roughly about 54 to 48, 46, 55, 45, in favor of starting before Labor Day.
Yeah, I remember in my days working, one year we went to July 1st because of the inclement weather, and so I think it's a good idea that if people are in favor, I just want to make sure that people are thoroughly in favor of it.
And what was very interesting is when the question was asked, should we continue this for one more year to get information? It was much larger. I think the number was 30%. So people were in favor since this was only the first year. Let's try it another year.
Thank you. With that, I yield.
Okay?
A second.
There's no motion, there's no...
Motion to approve?
There's no approval necessary. It's just a first read.
That's a first read, we're going to vote at the next meeting.
Number 2 is a vote to approve, and that's discussion of vote to approve the school committee meeting calendar for the school year of 2019 to 2020. This is subject to change based on the chair's schedule and the schedule of the committee.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve has been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 3 is a vote to approve the start of a food pantry program at Durfee High School to serve families in need across the Fall River Public Schools. Great initiative. Questions, comments?
Question?
Mr. Corey?
I just think that it's very altruistic on behalf of Stop and Shop to partner with the Fall River Schools and create a food pantry in the spirit of togetherness in our community. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to introduce yourself? And
Yes, Bob Cutting, Food Service Director here in the district. And I have Jen and Jim who are representing Stop and Shop tonight, and they would like to talk about what the commitment Stop and Shop is ready to put in to the district.
Hi, I'm Jen Brogan, the Director of Communications and Community Relations for Stop and Shop. We're here to propose the creation of a food pantry at Durfee High School. We know there's a great need in this community that students are going hungry after school at night and on the weekends, and we'd like to put an end to that. We've secured $150,000 in funding from the Stop and Shop Family Foundation for the 2019 calendar year. In addition, Jim and his team at our Freetown Distribution Center, where we have about 1,000 associates employed, many of which who live here in Fall River and have children within the school district. Jim and his team will be donating free transportation on a weekly basis of non-perishable goods. Bob and team will be managing distribution to what we have identified, or what the district has identified to as 10 families to start who are food insecure. We would like to brand the food pantry as our first ever Stop and Shop food pantry with both exterior and interior signage at the site, which has already been constructed at the high school. And in terms of continued funding, even though the grant is specifically for the 2019 calendar year, we can and will apply for an additional grant for 2020, and our intention is to, so long as things work well in this first year, continue to support this community as long as you need it. Thank you for considering.
thank you. Questions, comments? Vice Chair Costa?
Thank you. Could I ask through the chair that Mr. Pacheco come to the podium? Mr. Pacheco, does this in any way impact the contract we have with our food service vendor?
It does not.
So the food that will be provided by Stop and Shop through this pantry will then be given to, did I hear 10 families initially?
So initially, it'll be 10 families that have been identified from the district through guidance and
So this isn't
principals.
food that students will be consuming
This is
during
not. This is
school
a totally
days?
separate section. So it's a storage area at Durfee that will house the supplies, and it'll be packaged to the families, and then the families will deliver to the schools where those families' students are located, so that they can take those home on the weekend.
In the selection process for those families are going to
It's been
occur
through the schools,
so
through the individual schools.
principals or
Yes.
guidance or SAC
Exactly.
will make that request through your department?
It'll be through nutrition.
And-
If I could, so the idea with the smaller amount to start off with is we want to be sure that we can service those families at a
And
reasonable.
who's going to do the vetting in terms of the need for each of these families, and then who makes the final determination if you get 20 request for families?
So the dollar amount, obviously overall for the year, will determine just how much we can do. But the vetting process, as I said, will be done at the school level, and our management, our site management at the schools is very in tune to the needs of their students.
So it's not necessarily restricted to 10 families. You'd like to start with 10, but if the
Exactly.
need was greater, as long as the funds cover
Right.
those additional families until it runs out,
Exactly, and
those
also
families could still be
obviously,
serviced?
also our side of it, the logistics side of getting that food out to the individual families.
And so I certainly think it's a great program, and knowing the needs in this district, I think Stop and Shop will certainly meet the expenditure for at least the $150,000 without question. My concern was more about who selects the families, who vets that to check for the appropriateness that those families, truly are in need.
Yes.
And then, who makes those determinations about who gets it and who doesn't. I am a little concerned about that piece, though, because I think if we get to the point where you have to tell a family you can't get or we can't provide you with food, who does that come back on in terms of, a challenge to that or a question about why this family over my family, and who mediates that?
Well, to be totally honest, I am not prepared to give you all of those details. What I can say to you is that we currently would work with any local agencies who have already done a lot of that vetting to let us know that, yes, this family fits the criteria. They would fit the criteria with us for a certain amount of goods. And I think that we'll use those criteria along with what we know within our own site management.
Okay. The last question I have is probably more for Stop and Shop representatives than you, Mr. Pacheco, but how many community food pantries do you have currently in existence in other urban school districts, or maybe you have them in some of the suburbs? I don't want to just limit it to urban districts. I mean, you may have some, elsewhere, but how many do you currently have now?
So this would be our first school food pantry. We have supported others through the Family Foundation. We support a YMCA, the Hockomock YMCA, which is in the Foxborough area, and through that we have provided mini grants in the amount of $1,000 to about 6 school food pantries. So I am actually scheduled to do some site visits with those, and hopefully, have some learnings as to how things are working well there. But in all honesty, this would be our first.
And I apologize, I said one more question. I actually have another one, and you mentioned the signage or the advertisement, certainly, and I would imagine you want the recognition for the work that you're doing, and I don't have a problem with that. Could you just tell us about what it is you're looking to do in terms of the signage, the size, the location, in terms of the publicity for it? What does that look like? You said internal and external.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
We were hoping to do just a simple sign that says Stop and Shop School Food Pantry above the double door entry. We understand, however, that students will likely want to be discreet about this and may not want people to know that they need help. So we're happy to limit it to interior signage if preferred. On the interior, our creative team is working on a few posters, providing additional, phone numbers, resources they can go to for help for food insecurity, as well as some tips on healthy foods you can access on a budget.
Thank you. I appreciate the generosity. Certainly there's a need. Excited that we've been chosen as the first. It's maybe not the best situation to be in for families, but I appreciate Stop and Shop stepping up and offering this type of assistance to the families, and certainly I'm sure it'll go a long way in helping those families. So thank you for that, and I appreciate it. I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martins. Mr. Martins.
Thank you very much for your generosity. Since I like to see who I'm talking to. I highly support the program. In your very first paragraph, it says the to be distributed to 10 families across 16 schools who have been identified. I'm sure that there are more than 10 families that could certainly be helped by this. And if your major competitors would like to participate in a similar program, I'd highly endorse that too. But the question that I do have is on your signage in there. You don't have any problem with the sign, provided it starts with BMC Durfee High School in partnership with Stop and Shop. Can that be done?
Yes, yep,
Cool.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Nice. Mr.
Thank
Corey?
you very much. For Mr. Pacheco, I have a question for you. First of all, I want to thank the representatives from Stop and Shop. I think it's a great idea. I'm very sensitive to the needs of our community at large, and we certainly fit, that profile. Mr. Pacheco, I was just wondering along the lines for qualification for a program like this, in our quest as a school district to develop more parental engagement and more student, to lessen chronic absenteeism in the schools, I was just wondering if there were any those were amongst the qualifications. Students had to measure up to a certain benchmark in order to qualify for this charity. Is anything along those lines?
We have not gone that far as that. But that is something we could consider, absolutely.
Yeah, get the kids into school, and that way we develop a closer parent-school relationship, and the kids are cared for and nurtured for at a higher level. So I just see it as a win-win. If we could pull off something like that, we're taking a couple of problems and helping a couple of problems all at once. Thank you very much. I yield.
If I could too, it seems to be a misunderstanding, probably my fault, I'm sure. It's 10 per school, not 10 across the district. So it is 10 per school.
Excellent. It's 10 per school.
Yes.
That's quite a number of kids then, and so we can get a lot of engagement out of that,
Yes.
and make sure those kids are in seats in the classroom on most days. That would be a great thing.
It'll also be Durfee students who will be putting this packages together.
The Durfee students would be
yes.
the volunteers.
Right. Yes.
That's a great thing. Is that part of the senior program that they
It
have
is.
at Durfee?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's all tied into community service. It's an excellent thing. Thank you very much.
Mr. Aguirre?
Mr. Pacheco, so it says 10 families across 16 schools. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So it's 10 families in each of the...
Yes.
Somebody mentioned that this is already being built.
The space, we enlarged the storage space. So we needed more room for our custodial piece. We ended up swapping another area in the building for our custodial piece. So this has been transformed into an area that we can now use. It's in the cafeteria area.
And there's food there already?
There was an initial delivery that was sent in, and then there was a little glitch between us and Stop and Shop as far as the implementation piece. Now we're here looking for the approval. So nothing actually has gone out of that. And this is all non-perishables.
Yeah. And then it said in here somewhere that Whitson's is going to help. What does that mean?
So Whitson's has helped us develop along with Stop and Shop, develop the non-perishable list for the take-home, the menu, basically. And then what Whitson's may do as far as an in-kind services, as the program grows, we may have Whitson chefs come in to, one night a week, and there may be some parents who would like, to learn how to make some recipes and different things like that. So that would be Whitson's portion, along with some of the logistics in, accepting the deliveries with the Fall River Public School employees in order to get that room stocked.
Yeah, the only thing I would suggest and ask is that you communicate, and I think you mentioned it, with other agencies that are doing the same thing. So having worked in that field a while ago, it can get very overwhelming, and if people aren't talking to each other, you don't know who's getting what, and we want it to go to deserving, needy families. I get all that, but we also don't want it to be a burden on the schools or, when you're running it, and I wanted to say there was items in there just not canned goods, so then you got somebody's got to be responsible for when that stuff goes bad, and it's going to take somebody to be managing it, not just throw it in the warehouse and hope, and that's going to be you?
Yes. It will be someone, it will be me or my designee.
I see. That's a good way to have it. The only other comment I would have is on the signage. I think that we should approve this with the signage going to the facilities subcommittee, because I'd like to have a conversation about advertising in general, because I don't think it's right to, on the spot, support an advertisement when we don't necessarily even know our current advertising policies and regulations, how much money we're collecting from advertising and what we're doing. So I think we need an update on what's happening currently, and I'd like that part to be referred when the time does come for a vote, so we can discuss it further.
Making that in the form of an amendment?
Yes, but I don't think, is there a motion on this already approved? So I don't know.
I think there was a motion made. Was
All
there
right.
a motion made? No motion yet?
So when it comes up, I would like to either,
Make an amendment.
I'll make a motion that we approve it with the caveat that the signage goes to the facility subcommittee for further discussion.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes, thank you. Okay, and item number 4 is a vote to approve the expenditure of $80,000 for rental of a chiller unit or chiller units at Durfee High School up through August 1st, 2019. Is there a vote to approve?
So moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Just a second with a question.
Okay, second with a question. Mr. Vice Chair.
So the question I have is, tonight it's on the agenda for an expenditure of $80,000 for the rental chiller units to come from which account? Can I ask for the chair?
Salaries.
Salaries?
Salaries and contingency, we have 2 line items that we're requesting.
So then I have a point of information to the chair. This particular item was on a draft agenda last week, and the expenditure was set to come from capital improvements for an expenditure you sent down to the council for a total of $338,968.99. That request came from your office to the council on February 12th. It was to come from the school building projects for both Morton Middle School for the sum of $316,825.77, and for the small or Fonseca Elementary School account of $22,143.22. I also have the order or the acknowledgement from the city auditor that that funding was available in both those accounts. And then I have the vote of the city council that was unanimous on February 19th for the full amount for the chiller for Durfee, an amount of $338,968.99. So the question I have to the chair is, why wasn't it presented as such to this committee on this agenda when it was on the previous agenda?
Mr. Vice Chair, that's not on the agenda tonight, so that's not up for discussion. What's up for discussion is a vote to approve the expenditure of $80,000 rental of chillers. That's what's on the current agenda that I think we're all looking at, which is what's before us. What you're talking about is not before us, and therefore will not be addressed at this meeting.
Well, I'd ask the committee to appeal the decision of the chair that that's not an appropriate topic for this discussion, for this meeting.
That is literally not what is not before us.
Right. So I'm asking this committee to appeal your decision that that's not an issue before us for discussion tonight.
It's not something that's appealable. It says it right there. It's not on the agenda tonight.
Right, but we're voting on an expenditure for a chiller, and I'd like to know why you're asking us to take it out of our operating budget when it's already been voted on by the council for the full amount. So why would this committee take action on $80,000 from an operating budget when you've already sent this appropriation in its entirety from an appropriate account? Why would we want to take action to spend operating money when you've already identified money in a capital improvement account for schools It just doesn't make sense. So I'm going to ask, your decision is, you don't think it's an appropriate
Well, no,
request?
that-
I'm going to ask the committee to
Mr. Vice Chair.
take a second and vote on whether or not to appeal your decision. And
Mr.
by
Vice Chair.
Robert's Rules of Order, to appeal your decision, we need a simple majority vote. So I
Mr. Vice
propose
Chair,
that.
Before we propose
No,
that, this is,
point of information. I propose
Could
the
I
motion.
respond to your question?
But I propose the motion. It's on the table. It takes precedence over any comments of the chair. So I'm asking this committee to second and take a vote on the appeal of your decision.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Assad, and then I'll address the question on the table.
Without looking at the merits of what has been suggested, basically, in accordance with the policies of the Fall River School Committee, the individuals on the committee can certainly suggest and recommend certain items to be placed on the agenda. In accordance with the policies in effect right now with the Fall River School Committee, only the mayor makes the determination, has the authorization to place a matter on the agenda of a school committee meeting.
So, but to answer your question, Mr. Costa, because I don't want to shy away
So
from the
that
question.
doesn't answer the question, Mr. Chair.
I'm about to answer your question, so if you could allow me to answer the question and not interrupt me, I will answer your
Well, there's a
question.
motion on the floor, Mr. Chair, which takes precedence over your rebuttal or your comment.
Recess.
Okay. Take a recess. I think you need a vote to take a recess.
Recess. Thank you. Roll call, please.
What are we taking? What's
This is just to come back from recess. Roll
We
call.
didn't take a vote to go in, so I don't even think we need it, but.
Well, I just want to make sure everybody's still here for the public's
Yeah,
edification.
all right, that's fine.
Thank you.
On the,
Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
present.
Mr. Coogan?
Present.
Just point of information, roll call on what? To come back from
Just to-
recess?
For the edification of the public, to make sure that everybody is still back.
Or on my
is here.
motion?
No, this is just for the recess, that make sure everyone is still present.
Just a point of order. If we didn't need one to take a recess, then I would suggest we don't need one to come back.
Well, I'm calling for a roll call for those that are present here.
Present.
Mr. Coogan?
Present.
Mr. Costa?
Still here, present.
Mr. Hetzler?
Here.
Mr. Corey?
Here.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Careth?
Here. Okay, so with the item that is before us on item number 4 is a vote to approve the expenditure of $80,000 for rental of chiller units on Derby High School. That is what is before us tonight. However, other potential dollars can still be expended on the permanent purchase of those chillers. Recently, the city council and the mayor, in cooperation with this committee, transferred $1 million, and we are prepared to transfer an additional $600,000 to the school department. That money is going to be expended in the next 4 months. It has to be expended by June. That money was because of the savings in healthcare, and the system has been healthier than projected. Therefore, $1.6 million is being transferred from the city to the school department to be expended in the next 4 months. This mayor, in my administration, we have no intention of shortchanging the school department, not a single dime. We haven't had a history of doing that, and we will not do that, and that will not start tonight, that will not start tomorrow, that will never be done. We want the school department to get every dollar that they want. However, at this time, I think it's important for the public, and
Can I just,
it is
Mr.
my
Chair,
job. Excuse me,
just a
Mr.
point of
Mr. Vice Chair,
information?
can I
If
please
it's not on
finish?
the agenda for me to ask you, then why is it on the agenda for you to
I said I
explain
would-
to the committee
I said I would
the money?
answer your question, so I'm answering
But it's not
your
on the
question.
agenda, so if you ruled that it can't be discussed by me,
Okay.
then why is it that you can be discussed by
So if we
you?
don't want an answer, then we're going to call for a roll call and vote to approve for the chillers. So a roll call for the vote.
Point of order.
I
You
want
know-
to second Mr. Costa's. I want to hear. I want to know more about this. I do.
I've ju-
If you, I know. So I'm going to second it. So now we can talk about it in an open
Bruce,
meeting.
can you give us a clarification on this?
Well, basically, if there's a motion to approve the rental and there's a second, then it can be discussed on the rental.
On the rental?
Right.
Not
On
on the
the issue.
300.
Right, so we could discuss
The rental.
the funding source for this, which is what I raised. Why is it that we're spending $80,000 out of operating budget?
Okay, so
when you have already
there's a
sent
motion to approve the rental and a second, then we'll discuss the funding source.
Okay.
Is there a motion to approve the rental?
Yeah, I thought we already did it, but I'll make a
Okay.
motion. Sure.
Motion to approve the rental, is there a second?
A second, so we can talk about it.
Talk about where the money's coming from.
Yeah,
Okay,
everything,
so
yeah.
the money tonight on the agenda is coming from the accounts that are identified, salaries, as well as the other expense accounts. However, there's an additional $1.6 million that has been transferred to the school department. The city is not interested in shortchanging any money. That money has been approved by the council and, as the vice chair pointed out, is available. However, for the purposes of tonight, on the agenda is the $80,000 rental. What I'm asking the school department, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us, is to see a breakdown of where that $1.6 million is being spent in the next 4 months. Some of that money, we assume, will go to one-time expenses. So it's not our intention to shortchange the school department any money, but I think it is important for this committee to know where and for the city and citizens to know where $1.6 million is going to be spent over the next 4 months, unanticipated monies that are from savings of healthcare. So that's the reason. Mr. Aguirre.
Yeah, so just trying to look at what's on the agenda and making sure that we're all doing just what we want to do. And I hear the mayor saying that you're not looking to shortchange the school department. When I hear that, I hear the 1.6, whatever the money is, this 338 that the council approved is sort of separate. It's not
Correct.
necessarily in place of this. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page, that I don't think this is your intention, and I had a brief conversation with you where you had mentioned that that's not your intention, to not have us spend the 338 in the best way we can for this particular item. So you're not looking to replace any of the 1.6 with that. I just wanted to make sure that that was, first off, clear. But when it says, as presented by Ken Pacheco, COO, I think that there's some, when we read the thing that's attached, the one-pager, which is part of this agenda item, I want to say there's some issues here relative to whether we spend $80,000 possibly to rent something or actually purchase. So we'll still have to spend the 338 after, but I don't know that. I'm not the professional, so I'd like to have Mr. Pacheco present what he's looking for, so that it could be that we could all meet together here and come up with a good solution to say, there's a valid reason why we would need that spent now, while fully understanding your point, Mayor, as saying, what are we going to spend the 1.6 on? So I think if we just take a breath for a couple minutes, let Mr. Pacheco present, I think we all might be on the same page relative to what's a smart way to spend this money, and it might be a time-sensitive piece. If it's not, then so be it, but I would like to have Mr. Pacheco present before and just everybody relax a little bit and listen to Mr. Pacheco would be my advice.
Okay. Mr. Pacheco?
Sure. So the $338,968.99 is needed to purchase two 197-ton chiller units that will be installed in the current Durfee. And the reason why we are choosing the method of purchasing two, even though we're going to demolish the building, is that we're going to recycle those two units. They will be only 2 years old, 3 summers, 2 years old. We will then repurpose, recycle those two units into other buildings in the district. The reason for the $80,000 is to get those units in place for the start of this year right away. So the unit, until I have authorization, obviously, to order the units, I'm not ordering the units, and there will be a lead time. So I do need to get, to be sure that I have air conditioning in a building that windows don't open when the time is necessary.
So on that, you said the May 1st. If we were to purchase tonight, if we were to authorize you to purchase based on the money being available, can they be up and running on May 1st is I think the question that really needs to be answered.
Yes.
Because at that point, what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is if we spend $80,000 right now, as of whatever time, August or whenever it was going to run through, we just wasted $80,000 of the 330. So that's almost 1/4 of the money would be just going to waste, renting as opposed to actually purchasing now, in as long as you could get it in on time and the turnaround time could happen. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That is correct.
So that's your recommendation. If you had a recommendation one way or another, what would it be?
Purchase the units.
Purchase the units based on financial.
Based on the fact that 338,000 will buy the 2 units up and running, and that will get us where we need to be for the school year, this year, next year, and the summer of '21, until we're ready to evac that building.
And you're confident that although we're going to purchase them into a building that's going to be demolished, they will be repurposed, so we're not wasting that money?
That's why we're putting in 2 instead of 1 big unit. 1 big unit I couldn't use anywhere else in the district. By splitting that unit in half at 197 each, we will be able to repurpose those 2 units.
And where would that be? Do you know offhand? Or just...
One of them would be going to either the Green or Spencer Borden. Both of them built at the same time, and both of them are on life support. And either they would both go there, or one would go there and one would go to the auditorium building.
Okay, so I think that you had mentioned that before. That's where I was getting that from, that I thought that it was a purchase and get it out of the way. But to go back to the agenda shows the 80,000. I'm not sure that it was clear to everyone that that is a wasted 80,000. I think in the course of deciding, well, what's on the agenda, what's off the agenda, I think we might have missed that facts that you just currently presented. I think you made a valid point for us to spend the 338 now, and I think the mayor makes a valid point, and what are we going to spend the money on for the 1.6? And it's actually later on in the agenda going to be even more than that. So I think we should do both, quite frankly. I think tonight in the same motion, we should spend the 338 to buy the new, and at the same time, we can have an addition to that motion that we're going to spend money on one-time funds. And I think we could do both of those at the same time, and both parties. The mayor's point is well taken. We'll have it by one-time money, so we're not spending money on salaries and recurring, and we're spending the 338 on the chillers. I think you made a valid presentation, so that's what I would support, and I wouldn't support the wasting of 80,000. I yield.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I can say that in my time on this committee, particularly when your administration has crafted budgets, you have made good on the money that is required by law to meet your obligation for net school spending. So I will say that. The $1.6 million that you've announced you're giving us, and I'm not sure if your words were additional money. Let me clarify. That's not additional money. The $1 million is appropriated already in FY19's budget for your obligation for health care, which is a direct cost for education. It's net school spending eligible. The other $600,000 and change, the city's been notified by Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Jay Sullivan for Finance, that given a reduction in charter school students and enrollment and a change in the formula, we are now $600,000 shy of net school spending, and that needs to be made up. So that's not additional money to the district. It's money that this community in this district needs to fund for direct educational services in order to meet its obligation for net school spending. So it's not additional money coming. To your point and to Mr. Aguirre's point, if you're suggesting tonight that this committee take money out of that money to buy chillers, I would suggest it's not eligible, because that is a capital improvement project, which would require a vote of this committee of $150,000 or more for us to accept it as a capital project, which is not net school spending eligible. So, and that's my concern here tonight. that we have an opportunity to use money from capital funds that you've already requested and it's been appropriated by the council to buy the chillers necessary for the high school and to not potentially waste $80,000. And that was my request tonight, that we use those funds and not $80,000 that we're not going to recuperate, because you're still going to have to come back to this committee and ask us to consider allowing that expenditure of $300,000 for a capital project that is not net school spending eligible under the law. And anything over $150,000 is going to require a vote of this committee to allow your administration to use it as a net school spending eligible expense. So I'm not going to support $80,000 because I already know that the two accounts where it should come from, the money is there. It's an appropriate account because it's for capital improvements for schools. The city has already bonded for it. They already have it. It's already been requested by your administration and voted on and approved by the council. So I don't know why or others would want to approve $80,000 that we're just going to wash away, only to consider whether or not we want to use some of that direct educational funding, which I would propose should go directly to classrooms for educational expenses and not for a chiller on a roof. And that's why it's not net school spending eligible. So with that, I'll yield, and if it comes to a vote, I just want to say that I will not support it in this fashion. With that, I yield, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, no, I certainly don't disagree. The $80,000, if it is the consensus of the committee, is a waste, and we shouldn't spend $80,000. And I'm not shortchanging the 300 at all. That has been approved by the council and is accessible to this committee. It just is not on tonight's agenda. So I have no problem putting that on the next committee meeting agenda. I have no problem having a special meeting if there's a time constraint on that issue. However, I think it is vital that we understand as a committee where $1.6 million is going to be spent. So although you are correct, Mr. Costa, that $1.6 million in healthcare costs that was appropriated for healthcare is not going to be spent on healthcare, that is $1.6 million in cash that is now available to the school department to spend on net school spending eligible expenses. And all I'm asking is that we see where $1.6 million is going to be spent in 4 months before we take other votes like this. That's all that I asked for, that's what I'm requiring, and that's my perspective. Unfortunately, the $300-something thousand is not on tonight's agenda. We cannot take that vote on that money. However, I would have no problem putting it on the next agenda or a special meeting if there is a time constraint, which I understand they may be. So with that, I'll yield and I'll go to Mr. Martins.
Thank you. Right at the present time, we are currently dealing with agenda item discussion number 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. On discussion number 4, it says the expenditure of $80,000 for rental chillers at Durfee High School. But yet in the other here, there is the replacement of 2 air-cooled chillers, at Durfee in the amount of $338,968. Which one are we dealing with only? The 80,000?
We are dealing with
Or
tonight.
the 386?
Nope, tonight, what is on the agenda is the $80,000 rental.
I'm sorry?
What is on the agenda tonight is the $80,000 rental. That is up for approval, and if it has the votes, it gets approved. If it doesn't, it does not get approved.
But we are not discussing that 338,000?
We are not. It's been brought up because that is the ideal scenario. Mr. Pacheco has explained that he would like to purchase those chillers so that they can then be moved after Durfee High School is torn down and the new one is opened up. Those chillers could be moved to other facilities, which is the most prudent thing to do, instead of spending $80,000 on a rental.
Well, I guess I'm at a loss here. Why then do we have this material with regards to the $338,000 for the purchase of 2 coolers, 2 chillers?
Point of information.
When indeed, hang on, Mr. Costa, please.
Just a point of information for you, Mr. Martins, that's all.
When indeed the vote to approve the expenditure of $80,000 from the rental, for the rental of 2 chillers at Durfee High School. I still have yet to determine why one and then why a different one here.
Point of information, Mr. Chair, from my colleague, Mr. Martins?
Mr. Costa, if the...
To answer your
colleague
question,
would
Mr.
like-
Martins, the full expenditure was on the initial preliminary draft agenda. It went down to the mayor for approval, and he decided to take it off and asked the administration for $80,000 for a rental.
Excuse me, point of
That's
information.
why that's the information you're looking for.
Excuse me, Mr.
That's
Costa.
why it's listed that way.
Mr. Costa, I don't know where you got that information about the mayor requesting $80,000. I have no idea how much it costs to rent equipment. I didn't come up with the cost. That was placed back on the agenda, sent back to me for final approval. That's what happened, just so that we're clear
So
on
let me
where the
ask you this then,
information's
just for
coming. This is
transparency, Mr. Chair. Was the full expenditure that you sent to the council that they voted on to take out of the capital accounts, was that on the initial agenda that went to your office?
Everybody knows that here at this meeting. Everybody knows
Well,
it was on the initial agenda.
so it was,
But as-
and-
excuse
and
me,
who
excuse me. If I'm
decided to
answering your
take that
question,
off?
Please do not interrupt me.
So answer it, and I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So as you stated earlier, I originally sent the $338,000 to be transferred out of the other building accounts in February for this purpose. It is not until the last meeting that we accepted $1 million and most recently an additional $600,000. I understand that we here tonight are school committee members and I am acting in my capacity as the chair. However, in my capacity as the mayor, I think it's very important that the council, myself, and this committee knows exactly where $1.6 million is going to be spent in the school department within 4 months. That is why I slowed it down and I had the discussion with the superintendent. Now, I'm not going to put out the conversation that I had with the superintendent here. If you had a question or comment, you could have called me, you could have texted me, you chose not to. That's the end of this. We're going to move on from here, because we're just getting into now a pointless debate. We're going to move the question.
It's not a pointless debate,
It's-
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Costa, we're
And
gonna
I don't
move-
hear a motion to move the question, so it's
We're
still
gonna
under
move the
discussion.
question along,
We
and
haven't
we're
had a
going-
motion for that,
we're
Mr.
gonna
Chair.
move-
You can't unilaterally move a question without someone proposing that the question be moved and it get a second and a vote on it.
We're gonna
So
move
if
the
I've been
question
acknowledged to
along.
have the floor by you, all I want to know is why the original appropriation for the full amount, why it's not before this committee now.
Okay, so I will answer your question once again. Yourself and the superintendent crafted the agenda, correct?
Correct.
With the $338,000.
Correct.
The $338,000 was approved by the council from my recommendation in February.
Correct.
At our last meeting, we approved a $1 million transfer to the school department, and we are prepared to approve an additional $600,000, 1.6. I've already stated here tonight unequivocally that nobody's going to shortchange you the $338. That brings us to a total of $1.938 million to the school department to spend in the next 4 months by June. It's a fiduciary responsibility of the chair, as well as the mayor, to ensure that $1.6 million is being spent properly. So I requested, and I've requested again, I'll say it a third time this evening, that before this transfer is made, and the transfer money is available, that is unequivocally clear, it is available, that we get a breakdown of where $1.6 million is going to be spent. If there's an expedited need, I have no problem putting it on the next agenda or a special meeting if it is absolutely necessary. And I don't think that's unreasonable, and at this time, I'd like to move the question forward.
It's absolutely necessary, Mr. Chair, that it be on the agenda today so that we heard Mr. Pacheco say his preference would be to buy the units and not waste $80,000. You keep throwing out the 1.6. That is direct educational funding. It cannot, unless voted this committee, be used for capital projects. That is finance law. So you can say 1.6, and the reason you pulled it off is because you want to see, and it's your fiduciary responsibility to see how that's spent. Well, if this committee decides to spend $1.6 million in classrooms for direct educational services, you are still going to have to come up with $338,000 for a capital improvement. It cannot be used out of the money you're proposing by law unless it comes before this committee because it exceeds $150,000.
And nobody's arguing with you on that, Mr. Costa. The money is available in that account and
Well,
is
I think
approved.
you're
It's
confusing
just not
the
on
issues.
tonight's agenda.
And my point is it should be.
Okay, but it is not. So we have to move on the question that is before us. You've made your statements, you've made your points. I'm going to ask that the question is moved and we vote to approve or not approve the $80,000. If the full amount is necessary and this does not get approved, we'll either have a special meeting if there's a time crunch, or the school department can can have it on the next agenda. That's the two options that are before us this evening. If there was an issue prior to tonight, Mr. Costa, you could have called and discussed it with the chair. You chose not to, and that's why we're here this evening.
I didn't get the agenda till Friday afternoon, which wasn't within 48
That doesn't
hours.
come
so-
from, that doesn't come from me. That comes from the school
We didn't
department.
approve it until when?
When did we approve? We approved
I didn't
this
get the
a while
agenda
back.
till Friday, so it would have been within 48 hours, so I could have taken it up under new business or during this discussion, but regardless, you made it sound like I could have made a call, but you wouldn't have been able to put it on the agenda anyway,
I
because the
think we
meeting was
absolutely
posted
could.
with this agenda, and I didn't get it till Friday.
Well, that's something that you have to
So-
take up with the superintendent, because I don't, these agendas
Mr.
don't
Chair,
come
I
from
move
mine.
to have this tabled until such time as we have more detailed information as to how much it's going to cost, whether this is an outright purchase or if this is a rental in there, as to where that $80,000 is going to come from, and where it says over here that the $338,000 for the purchase
Mr. Chairman?
of it. So my
Motion to table has been made. Is there a
table until we
second?
get all this information.
No, Mr. Chairman?
Is there a second on the motion to table? Okay, seeing no second, we continue the discussion. Mr. Hexler.
All right, can I ask Mr. Pacheco a few questions, please? I'm concerned. I don't want to waste $80,000 at all. I'm not really sure why we're going to do that. It doesn't make any sense. Mr. Pacheco, how soon do we need to purchase this $338,000 unit?
Today.
Today. Is there?
We can,
Can
it's
somebody-
not
Yesterday,
possible.
last week, next week, the sooner the better. I need to, the reason for the rental is, my concern is if those units are not put into the queue at the factory and I get them in time, I will not have the ability to get them installed in time. So that's the urgency. And I'm not confident 2 weeks, 3 weeks go by, it's 2 and 3 weeks on that queue, that I'm concerned that this is going to be pushed out into May.
Right.
And at that point, with no windows, operable windows, if we have a few warm days, it's going to be unbearable in the building.
Absolutely.
It's the entire air conditioning system for the entire 543,000 square feet.
So my question for the chair, if he has a second, what's the mechanism here for us? How can we make this happen tonight?
You cannot. It's not on the agenda. You can either vote to approve the $80,000 rental,
Chairman?
or you can not approve
Mr.
that. That is
Chairman?
what is on the agenda this
Chairman?
evening.
I wanna-
Mr. Coogan, if we could
I
just,
made the original motion. Can I amend my motion?
can we just answer the
You can amend the
individual's
motion,
question
go
here?
ahead.
Thank you. So tonight, this is what is before us. So it's either approve the $80,000 or not. I don't disagree with Mr. Pacheco that the best thing to do is purchase the equipment. That's not the issue, but what is before us, based on the rules that we have to follow, is the $80,000. It is not the purchase of $300,000. It's right before you. So unless there's an opportunity to amend that, which I don't believe there is because it's not on the agenda, we cannot vote on the $338,000. The money is still there. It's still available. It can be on the next agenda, or it can be on a special meeting within 48 hours of this meeting. Those are our options as I see it right now. So that addresses your question. You want to yield, I can call on Mr. Coogan if you yield your time.
Just a few more questions. So, Mr. Pacheco, did you inform any member of this committee of that, the relevance and the importance of getting this on this agenda so we could purchase the units versus, because I don't want to waste $80,000. I'm sure you don't want to waste $80,000 either.
It was on the initial agenda, so I did ask the superintendent at his meeting to put this on the agenda.
All right. And gentlemen, if somebody could please tell me why did we then decide to remove that from the agenda and
That
only
is
go with
not on the agenda for
$80,000?
this- This is not, that's not on the agenda for this evening. What's on the agenda this evening is the $80,000.
No, I understand that, Mr. Chair.
That's what's on the agenda.
I don't want to waste the money, right? And here
Okay,
we are now.
you
So
vote-
could we?
So then you vote no.
Well,
Those are the options that are before you
and
this evening.
then the students and the teachers suffer in the building.
I disagree. I think we can have a special meeting. If the consensus seems to be moving towards purchasing the equipment tonight, we don't know how the vote's going to shake out. If the vote is approved, then Mr. Pacheco is authorized to spend $80,000 on a rental tomorrow. If it's not, then we come back to another meeting, either 48 hours if there's a need, or if not 48 hours and there's not a need, we can put it on the next agenda as a 338. The money is still there. I've acknowledged that. It's in the account. It's been approved by the council. There is no issue. However, the issue that this chair still has is that $1.6 million is going to be spent in 4 months, and nobody, including the superintendent, knows exactly the breakdown of where $1.6 million is going to be spent.
But that's
$1
not-
million is going to be spent, but
Right.
$600,000, we have no idea.
But that's not fully fair, Mayor.
That's-
Because I can't do anything without the permission of this committee.
I
So I
understand.
brought to the finance subcommittee tonight my proposals, and they're prepared to talk about them tonight.
Okay.
So there is a plan.
Okay,
You got to
but for
remember that
tonight's meeting,
the
tonight's
money,
meeting.
the expenditure of money, though, is from the committee as a whole.
I understand.
All right.
For tonight's meeting, what is on the agenda is the expenditure of $80,000 on rental. If not, that's okay, then it doesn't pass, and then we have to vote another time. That is what's before us tonight. To determine any other theories is not what's on the agenda. So we are going to move this question forward shortly after everybody's questions are fully vetted and answered. So, Mr. Hecksler, if you have further
So, yeah,
questions.
just a few follow-up questions. So, let's just say we have a meeting, which I would recommend. If that's the only avenue to purchase this equipment, then I'm not sure, if it pleases you, Mr. Chair, we'd be having an emergency meeting, which I don't necessarily want to do because it's like a waste of a night. Again, we all got to get together, but that's okay. Mr. Pacheco, if we decided in 48 hours we could have another meeting, would it be too late then, or would that be okay?
No, it would be fine.
Okay.
It would be fine if you had that meeting next Tuesday. I mean, the 48-hour piece, if I have a pretty good idea that we're pushing that direction, then it's going to obviously make the process easier.
Okay, and thank you, Mr. Pacheco. Is there no way to amend this motion?
I don't think you can. It's not on the agenda tonight.
Well, I yield. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Coogan.
I made the original motion. I want to amend that motion from 80,000 to 338,996, because it is in the descriptor that we have in front of us describing the thing, and I want to go with the higher number. If I wanted to reduce the amount, I could do it, so I'm just trying to increase it.
Okay, you know what, Mr. Coogan? If that's the amendment that's made, I think that's fine. If there's an open meeting law complaint, we all know we have open meeting law complaints all the time, and we'll just take the vote again, but at least it'll be a valid vote tonight, and we'll just go forward.
Save ourselves from having a meeting.
That's fine. If that's the will of the
I second the amendment.
committee. Okay. It's been seconded. Mr. Martins?
That motion is for the purchase and installation of 2 chillers at a cost of $338,900, basically. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's correct. Okay. That's what the motion is on
To
the
amend
table
it-
at the present time.
To amend the original motion to purchase the chillers for the full amount of $338 instead of the rental of $80,000.
I'm sorry?
Instead of the rental of
Right,
$80,000.
okay.
Correct? Is that-
And that fund is that money is coming from inactive capital cost, capital projects, which is controlled by the city for Martin Middle School and small elementary school.
That is correct, and that's already
That's
been
correct.
transferred and approved. We sent it down in February.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
You're welcome. Mr. Aguilar?
Just want to clarify that it's the 338,968 and 99, just so for the record, that we have the entire amount. And I do think that we can amend it based on the fact that it's on the agenda saying as presented by Mr. Pacheco, but the backup documents, which also is a public record, do indicate as such. So we could have amended it. I think it's just the right thing to do, and it's not really that controversial, to be honest. I think everybody agrees we're not going to waste 80 grand, and we shouldn't waste 80 grand, so I'm in favor of it. But my only other comment is we went back and forth about agendas and draft agendas, and I, for one, have asked this committee, the administration, both in the school and the city, to get this whole committee a draft agenda. As these guys were talking about a draft agenda, I saw it, I didn't see it, he saw it, he didn't see it. I'm in the dark, quite frankly, because I don't see any draft agendas. And I think, and regardless of where we go with this, good communication would be from whoever's creating the agenda, which is the superintendent. I know that's been past practice here that we work with the vice chair, get it to the chair. We should just come up with a draft agenda, and 2 weeks before, a week before, send it to the full committee, so that if we do have questions, we can ask the mayor, the super, we can get some information, that's all. So it's not really for part of this, but I know we kept talking about draft agendas. I'd ask that the full committee get a draft agenda so we can know sort of what's happening. And I think we wouldn't be sitting here right now if the full committee got that. So separate from an issue, but I am going to support this amendment. I yield.
Request a vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martins. There's a call for the question, for the requested vote of the end with the amendments. Is there a second?
I don't think there's a second, Mr. Chair, but I have a
Second with the question?
point. No second.
No second?
I'm not second to move the question. I haven't finished discussing it.
Okay, so there's no
No
second.
one's identified to me where the full amount is coming from. Is that coming from our operating budget? And if so, can I ask Mr. Almeida if the city does make good on the money that should have been on tonight's agenda, can we transfer it from that capital fund back into our operating budget?
It won't be coming from the operating budget. It'll be coming from that capital account. That capital account that you have
So
in the
you're
backup
identifying the
documentation.
expenditure is going to come from the capital
It's
account?
in, that's where it originally was when I sent the documents to
I just want to make sure there's
the
an
draft
acknowledgement
agenda.
by the administration that that's where it's going to come from, because if that's the case, I'll support it. But if it's going to come out of our budget with some mechanism to try to transfer it back into an operating budget, we're back to square one. You have a capital expense that's not at net school spending eligible, that you're going to try to put in an operating budget where there is direct services and spending in there that is net school spending eligible. So I just want to be clear. Mr. Mons, hold on for a second, please. Well,
As to the intent for the purpose of calling the question.
you need a second, Mr. Martins, to call the question. You need a second, it needs to be a vote in order to move the question. If you want to hand that to my colleague, he can check it out. But so the question I have is that amount coming from the full, coming from the capital account or our operating budget?
The committee should have documentation
I
of
have
that.
I do. I have the
Okay,
order.
so in that documentation, there is the approvals coming from city
Right.
council and the mayor to the school. If you're asking whether or not that account is already set up,
No, what I'm asking for is, despite
Outside
the
of our
approval that went down to the council, the council approved the expenditure, it's now still sitting at the administration, back at the city administration and finance department. Does the city then have to transfer that to us, yes or no? Or can the mayor say, I don't want it sent down there, even though I requested it and it's been approved?
I think the mechanism is already in place for us to use that account. It was just waiting for a vote of this body.
Okay, I just
The
want to be clear
mechanism
where it's
itself,
coming from.
Yeah, the mechanism itself, I
So
think,
it's
has already
not
been
coming
set
from
up.
our operating budget?
It's set up as a
coming
capital
from those
account.
two accounts that I cited earlier?
Yes.
Thank you, I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, further questions, comments? There's already a motion. It's been seconded, I believe. Is that correct? Has it been seconded? It's good, okay. And this is a motion to approve
On the amendment.
on the amendment. Well, it's the motion to approve the $338,000 and change, we have it listed there, for the purchase of chillers for Durfee High School, instead of the $80,000. And that's going to come from the account, just so it's on the record, it's going to come from the account that's already been transferred from the city council, which this administration sent down in February. Is that correct?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. It's got to be taken, the vote's got to be taken on the amendment, because if the amendment fails, we're back to the original motion,
Yep,
which was
that's the-
80,000.
That's the amendment. I just wanted to clarify for everybody's knowledge. So that's the amendment. So this is a vote on the amendment. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, now is there a motion to approve it as amended?
So moved.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Roll call, please. This is Mr. Martins. Sorry about that. The motion is now the amended motion, which is to approve the purchase of $338,000 and change worth of chillers for Durfee High School from the accounts that were outlined in the original documentation, which have been approved by the city council, sent down by the administration. Okay?
We just voted on that.
No, we voted on he asked me to repeat the amendment.
Didn't we just take a roll call on the amendment?
Yes, and he
Which
asked me.
covered the 338,000, the whole total?
Correct.
The only time we'd need to take another vote is if the amendment failed, then we'd be back to the original motion. If the motion carries, then we're done with it.
No, I think that was a vote. Let's be sure, so we're going to take another vote, because my understanding was that was the motion to amend. Now the amendment's been accepted, so let's just take one more vote, just to be clear.
Perfect.
Is there a motion and second?
Yes, there
Okay, motion has been made and seconded, roll call.
is. Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, item number 5, year-to-date budget report. Questions, comments?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve has been made, is there a second? Second with the question?
Yeah.
Second with the question, Mr. Aguilar.
So I'm just looking at on the reports that were presented. The one relative to the healthcare school projected total, which is page 3 of the document. Am I reading this right? That, and I think I am, but that we already had the 1 million that the mayor went to the council and they transferred for the healthcare that was projected high. If I'm reading this right, there's, in addition to that, a $1.8 million difference? Meaning the numbers are coming in even lower than what we originally thought, which would necessitate another transfer?
Yes.
And that's, so you've checked that, you've double-checked that, you've probably triple-checked it?
I have, yes.
And so that's pretty, and we're getting closer to the end of the year, so the more it goes, it's solid, like this is a solid number?
The further it gets into the year, it's much more solid, yes.
So if we took the 1 million that was transferred, and your number is a 400,000? Like, the original one we got transferred was 1.4?
Yep.
So you have 400,000 there, and 1.8 on the bottom equals 2.2 million. That the healthcare is less still?
It's the 1 million plus the 1.8. So the 1 million's already been transferred, and it's an additional 1.8.
Okay, so the top piece is already kind of folded in?
Correct. That, the 1.4 that you're referring to is the anticipated transfer from the grants for this year in total.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking of whatever you had come up with a number, Mrs. Sahadi came up with a different one,
Okay.
but it was more than $1 million. We had
It was like
1.7
or so million dollars last time.
So 1.8 is a lot of money.
Well,
So-
that's subtracting the 600,000 already, Kevin, or you have?
No, this
So it's
is-
1.2 additional,
No,
It's 1.8.
2.4.
It's 1.8.
1.8 additional, so you already have put in the 600?
The 600,000 separate
Okay.
from this.
Just one
So
motion.
that's got to be added.
Yes.
So,
600, may I?
Yeah.
Just point of order, the 600 is because of the, we don't have as many students in the charter school this year than we did, so that
Correct.
money was already budgeted,
Correct.
but it's not health insurance money.
right, so without a calculator, we have $1 million sitting there now that's already been transferred. We have 1.8 potentially that is going to need to be transferred for the healthcare. And we have 600,000 additional funds.
Yes.
3.4.
That comes out to 3.4 million. So that's, good news, but it's also something that needs to be taken seriously because we don't want to waste that money. We also need to look at one-time expenses, how we can spend it. My recommendation to the mayor, to this administration, would be to now, as we're starting to discuss these things, I know typically we go to the finance subcommittee, but all members are not on that committee. I think with something this big and this large, that we have a special session of the actual full school committee to say how we're going to spend that 3.4 million. Because I, for one, that I'm not on the finance committee, feel in an awkward position to not necessarily ask my questions, and then I come here, and, I think this is a large amount of money, that we have a full special meeting dedicated to what we're going to do with this money, would be my recommendation, and I'd make that in the form of a motion.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Just a question on that. You want an accounting of the $1 million that we already have?
That's all we have.
So your question, how we're going to spend all of it, and we're not 100% sure what healthcare is going to do, but presumably we're going to have a shortfall in expenses, which is going to require a transfer to us, like the $1 million. But we have a breakdown of the $1 million. We discussed that in finance. That was referred to the full committee. It was on the draft agenda that went down to the mayor's office, and it, again, didn't end up on this agenda. Or we would have had that discussion tonight on how to spend the original $1 million, which has been proposed. We discussed it in finance. We referred it back here. So my hope is that it will make it on the agenda, as it should have been on this one, at the next special meeting. But
Right.
Regardless if you're on the subcommittee or not, Mr. Agia, you're going to get a full breakdown, the whole committee's going to, about what the proposed request will be to spend that $1 million.
I think his motion is to have that discussion in full committee.
Yeah, so
Right,
basically,
we could have had
just
that
to
tonight, is
clarify
what I'm
I'm
trying to
looking for.
say.
No,
Just what
that
I'm
would
trying
have
to
came from the
clarify.
finance committee.
I'm sorry?
That would have been a report from the finance committee.
We referred it for discussion at the
Right, I
last
think
finance
Mr.
subcommittee
Mr.
meeting.
Aguiar
It was
Correct me
on, it was on the
Correct me
agenda,
if I'm
the
wrong,
draft
but you wanna-
agenda, and when it made it to your office, it came off just like the other item did.
Yeah, I don't want to
What
get
I'm
into the
saying is
agenda
that we
piece,
could have had that discussion tonight, Mr. Aguirre.
but my question is just along the lines of, we have tonight, and I happen to be there as a guest, just watching. And a document was passed out that said how the superintendent would recommend to spend $1 million, 1.6 or something, in the last 5 minutes of the. There's a
Just the
document that
1
has 600,000 on it too, but regardless of what that is, if we turned around and said, we had that subcommittee meeting, and 5 minutes before this meeting we did, what I want to just say is that, separate from the one, if we have 1.1, 1.2, 3.4, is I'd like to get the full committee to the table when we talk about these major issues. And I'd even go further, and I've mentioned this in the past to the superintendent, just in a off-the-cuff conversation, that when we do our budget as a whole, I would like that same process to be followed, rather than have it go to subcommittee and only have those members participate in that, because it becomes very difficult to try and weigh in. And when we have things to say, well, how are we going to spend the money? And it's already laid out, I know the superintendent can make recommendations, but getting some feedback from school committee members that have to vote on the final product is going to be needed in a public session to be able to say, no, I think we should go sort of in that way. So we should give him direction as a body before those decisions are made, rather than, okay, this is how we're going to spend it, so now if I want to make even a bright idea to spend it some other way, I have to offend somebody else because I say, well, we took it out of that school to go to this school. So all I'm trying to say is if we can have it ahead of time as a group, sort of weigh in so we can throw some things around, and then that would be better. So whether it's $1 million or whether it's 3.4, my motion would be that any meetings that come up with additional funds get brought to the full committee for a full session so everybody can weigh in.
That motion is made. Is there a second?
Just second with a comment.
Second with a comment.
So that will happen. The draft budget will come to the committee. We referred the draft FY20 budget to the full committee, so that'll come before you. The discussions we had about the $1 million that was originally transferred to us, we had that discussion 2 weeks ago in finance. That was referred to the full committee and should have been on tonight's agenda for us to discuss.
Because I think what Mr.
It did not
Aguirre's
make
motion
that. No, I
is-
understand. I understand his motion, but I want to clarify for him, his concern is that the whole committee should weigh in on that, and I couldn't support that concern any more than he's expressing it tonight. It should be, and I'm saying that it had been referred, it should have been on tonight's agenda, and it wasn't. So we could have taken care of at least $1 million this evening had it been listed as an agenda item. You could have weighed in up or down votes on line items, you could have suggested expenditures, you could have had all that discussion, we could have tabled it. There are a number of things that could have
Yeah, so
happened.
my only point is saying, it
I
has
yield.
nothing to do with the agenda today. My basic point is then, and I wasn't aware that that was on for a week or 2 weeks ago, would be that if this motion had passed originally, 2 weeks ago, it wouldn't have gone only to the subcommittee. It would have been brought to everybody. That's the only thing I'm trying to
And
say.
it would have been tonight,
But
is
you,
what I'm saying.
what
to
I'm
you.
saying,
It
though,
got
Mr.
referred
Costa,
here.
I
for
Mr.
agree.
Costa, please let
We're
your
agreeing to the
colleague
same thing.
finish.
What I'm just suggesting, though, is the people that are on the finance subcommittee have the time to weigh in outside of this full body committee. And I, as one member that's not on the finance committee with those major decisions, would like to have a little bit of a say and a little bit of a weigh-in on how we spend some of those monies ahead of time. So it really was, this motion should have been made 3 weeks ago then. But now that we're just talking about it, I'd like to just say, I think we should all talk about our budgets, sort of like a city council meeting. They have a committee on finance. We should have the same thing, everybody together, so we don't have to have those meetings, and then these meetings, and then other meetings. Let's just have one budget meeting as we go forward.
Yeah, and I think I think the difference between what the vice chair and Mr. Aguirre are saying is that Mr. Aguirre wants to weigh in on all of the decisions on the $3.4 million that we're going to spend in full committee, rather than the finance committee provide recommendations where at the full committee we can determine whether those are going to be accepted. So I think that's the motion. I think we're going to take a vote on that motion at this time. It was seconded.
Whoa. I got a comment.
Mr. Coogan.
I understand Kevin's point, but if you look at what it says proposed. It doesn't say this is what we're going to do. It's my position that if this had been in front of us on the agenda, then it's like every other thing. We can pick apart and add stuff and delete stuff. It doesn't say final draft or anything like that. These are ideas, and these ideas are coming from the people that live this every day. I do obviously respect Kevin, because I know he has a lot of knowledge on this stuff, but these are their recommendations for how to spend it. Now, if Kevin has a better idea, he helps me all the time with amendments and motions, and I do support him in that regard. But I don't think we're closing. It almost sounds to me like the Finance Committee is bringing something forward that no one's seen and that they're not going to be able to weigh in on. That's not the case at all. I have too much respect for Kevin, and he knows it, and I appreciate his input on all this stuff, but it does come before everybody to have their say in and out on any of these items.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Mr. Coogan. I think the challenge here for this committee, which is a good position we're in, so to speak, is that we have $3.4 million, where in previous years, you probably didn't have $3.4 million that you had to be responsible to spend in a 6-month period of time. So I think what Mr. Aguirre is trying to achieve through his motion is that there's more inclusion, more committee members that weigh in on the makeup of those suggestions and recommendations to the full committee. Maybe there's a way to expand or have a separate finance meeting with the full committee, something like that, but I think that's the purpose of his motion, and the superintendent would like to weigh in.
Just point of order, the committee has the ability, and this has been the practice in a couple of the other systems I was superintendent in. The finance committee is usually a committee of the whole. Then you don't have these problems. The question becomes, there's a lot of meetings that happen during budget season, and this august body would have to be there. And I think in their ultimate wisdom at one point in Fall River, the committee made the decision to have a subcommittee so we could have a quorum for these important deliberations.
And that's my point. I think in years past, you probably didn't have $3.4 million in a crunch time to spend in 6 months. So I think that's where some of this confusion is. So I think maybe for the 3.4, what Mr. Aguirre is saying is because we have 3.4 million to spend in 6 months, that the committee as a whole should meet to discuss those recommendations. I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable and responsible for the committee and all of the members to weigh in. So, Mr. Hexler, on the motion?
I just have a comment and a question. No way do I want to slow down the process, though, of spending the money by having to wait for another meeting, right? So if that's going to do that, I don't necessarily want to vote in favor of it. I want to be able to get these projects rolling as soon as possible. You know, as soon as we know we have some funding for some of these projects, I want to make that happen. So I do want to talk about them, but I mean, they were brought up at a regular meeting, right? As they were.
Yeah, I'll bounce this around with the vice chair and the superintendent, and we'll try and get the additional 2.4 million on the next agenda, and we'll discuss where that money will be spent.
I yield. I don't know.
Okay,
Just
Mr.
on
Aguirre?
Hetzler's point, I think doing it the way that I'm suggesting will actually be quicker. So what happens now is we have to have a subcommittee meeting. 3 members have to go to that meeting and sit for 2, 3 hours or 5 hours or however long, discuss it. Quite frankly, if they come before us again, now we might have another 2 or 3 hours of discussion. I'm saying let's just have one 5-hour discussion, whatever it takes, and we get it done like this. So I think this part of the motion, and as the superintendent had mentioned, having a finance committee be a committee of a whole, it'll expedite the process more so than slow it down. And with that being said, we looked at, like, there's a thing that was supposedly at a meeting, but we haven't gotten it. Like, I haven't seen it still. So my only thing is saying and this is probably aimed towards the school administration, that if we have a subcommittee meeting where something was discussed, that typically would come to us all. And I don't recall getting that particular piece. And my other last point is just to say, there is something to be said for having something decided, whether it's even by the people that work in the schools, because it comes out of it as a recommendation for how to spend the money. There is something to be said for not changing that when you get to a full committee, if you're just being realistic. Because you don't want to be taking away from, so asking to spend money on X is actually fine unless that was going to be spent on Y, and those people that were in those schools were told that. Now how do I go to say X? And here's a case in point. The $1 million that's here, I just watched a finance meeting where it said computers are an issue, MCAS, this, that, and everything. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, we got $1 million, we're going to have more. We should be buying all kinds of computers and Chromebooks for these kids to have technology and all that. And I look on this list and it's $11,000. I personally might say, no, I think we should spend $400,000 on Chromebooks. But My point is, if that's already listed, it makes it just a more difficult discussion.
Yeah.
Not trying to fight with anybody, not trying to argue with anybody, but I just think that would help us to sort of have us all weigh in and feel better about the budget in the end. With that, I
So,
yield.
I think the motion, we should take a vote on the motion.
Second.
The motion- Okay, the motion's been seconded, and this is to continue the discussion in full committee as a whole, on the money that is being spent. So roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, number of items for your information. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. You didn't vote to approve the budget, the year-to-date budget report. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Motion's been made.
Are we still on the FY19 budget?
We are. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, there's a question. There was a motion and seconded on the motion. Question.
What is the status of the $608,440 shortfall for FY19 net school spending?
That item is in finance for the city council to be discussed tomorrow night.
Be discussed tomorrow night?
Yes, sir.
So we'll have some, okay. At that public meeting?
It'll be after the public meeting.
After that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
Thank you. We have a second. Roll call, please, and vote to approve the year-to-date budget report.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, next we have a number of items for your information. Is there a motion to place on file?
So moved.
Motion to accept and place on file?
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any new business this evening?
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair?
Thank you. I think it's become quite clear that the committee probably needs to take a look at how our agendas get created and also how they get approved. So I'm going to make a motion tonight to ask that for the next either scheduled special meeting or next scheduled regular meeting, that policies that have been adopted by this committee, B as in boy, D as in David, B as in boy, be placed on the agenda. And that also B as in boy, E, D as in David, B as in boy, also be placed on the next agenda. And I also would like on the agenda a proposed motion that the committee consider at the next regular scheduled meeting and not tonight, because our policy as it exists now requires that any change in any existing policies has to be listed as an agenda item in order for it to be amended, modified, or changed. So as a result, I'm asking that both those policies be placed on the next regular, either special meeting if we have one, or regular scheduled meeting, whichever one comes first. I'd also like this motion for consideration placed on the agenda so members can decide up or down if they're in favor of a change and how we craft the agenda. And I need to say that I'm concerned about the number of agenda items that are on the preliminary draft that end up removed before they get to this committee. We've had the Talbot Capital Project taken off. We've had the Henry Lord Chillers taken off. We've had a request for CPA funding for the administration building windows taken off. We had the $1 million that the Finance Subcommittee referred here for this night, for tonight's agenda, removed. We had the $380,000 plus for the Durfee Chillers on the preliminary agenda, removed for tonight. We have an obligation to be transparent with the public, requiring us to take decisions on either capital improvements. Now, I understand they may not get funded, but we still should be discussing those items in a public meeting, and we should be taking action on those. Whether or not the administration has the ability to fund those projects, that can be determined at a later date. But at the last budget meeting I went to before the council, they asked us specifically, what are we doing to maintain the existing buildings we have? We explained we had capital improvement needs, and each time we've been prepared to discuss those here, they have not made the agenda. So I'm asking that both those policies be placed. I'm also proposing this motion, that the vice chair, upon consultation with the chair and the superintendent of schools, shall approve the agenda for the school committee regular meetings. A school committee member may request that any topic within the jurisdiction of the Fall River School Committee be placed on the agenda of any school committee regular meeting. The school committee member shall make his or her request in writing to the chair, the vice chair, and the superintendent of schools no later than 5 business days so that we can discuss it in the planning meeting before the date of the scheduled school committee regular meeting. The topic shall be placed on the agenda of the regular meeting of the school committee. If for whatever reason the requested topic is not placed on the agenda of the school committee regular meeting, any school committee member may move under new business that the requested item or topic be placed on the agenda for the next meeting of the school committee, like I'm doing tonight. If the requested topic must be acted upon prior to the next school committee regular meeting, then any school committee may introduce the topic under new business for discussion and/or vote. So I make that in the form of a motion. I'm asking for my colleagues' support on that. I think it's imperative that we have agendas that bring us the discussions and the topics that we're required by the vote of the people to discuss and act on. So I'm asking that those be placed on the agenda in addition to that motion. I make that in the form of a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair, can you please clarify for the public what those sections are, as well as repeat the second motion, because you have a couple motions there, and I want to take this one by one.
So that was a straight motion. That was all one motion.
That was all one motion?
That was all one motion. The BDB is policy that outlines school committee offices and the duties of the chairperson and the vice chairperson. That's BDB. And BEDB is our policy with respect to the agenda format that was approved by the Fall River School Committee on November 13th, 2017. So for the public's edification, it's policy BDB. It was adopted December 13, 2010. And BEDB, agenda format, was approved by the Fall River School Committee on November 13, 2017. I make that in the form of a motion.
I second with a comment.
Mr. Exler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maintenance is a really big concern for everyone throughout the city. That was one of the major complaints we heard when asking the public to approve Durfee. It's something we hear time and time again, so I definitely never want to miss having something about maintenance. It's something to do with our buildings, improving the buildings off of the agenda, so I absolutely support my colleague.
Okay, so let's be very clear about something, though. However, there was nothing discussed about maintenance, taking it off, taking it on. The point, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, this is the first time in a long time, if not ever, we can do the research, where we're transferring $3.4 million to be spent in 6 months. That money is not all going to flow into the classroom. It's physically not possible to. This committee has the ability to override the $150,000 in spending to include additional capital projects. So it is the chair's opinion, as acting in a dual position, as the mayor and the chairman of the school committee, that we all get on the same page as to where that money is being spent. Capital projects in the classroom, new positions, etc. That is what is financially and fiscally responsible for all parties. That's very important. The vice chair would like us to now change the structure so that he is the final approval of the agenda. And that is a slippery slope and a dangerous path. The vice chair has always been able to contact me, the superintendent, sit down, discuss the agenda. We haven't had any issue until today. I have obviously high suspect that this is because of recent removal of his position on the Durfee Building Committee, obviously. But I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think that we should maybe process that, but that's my opinion. So I just want to make it very clear, however, this is not a maintenance issue. We haven't had any issues that this administration has said, hey, you know what, we're not going to maintain a particular property. Talbot, Tansy, these schools didn't become maintenance issues in the last 3 months. They became maintenance issues over the last several years and decades. That's the issue. And the school department and the city has not had the money to maintain those properties. That's the real cause of the issue. Now we have $3.4 million to disperse. Now we have $7.4 million in stabilization money. Now we have money to fix schools and to maintain properties. And we're putting money in the budget for maintenance. Prior to this year, and the vice chair has been on the committee for a number of years, he knows that that money did not exist. That's why it was not spent. So I think that it's really important for the committee to consider that when discussing this, and my phone number and open door policy still exists for all members of this committee. Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, I thank you for that. So just let me respond. This has nothing to do with my removal from the building committee. That's your decision of the statute. You made it. You feel that was a decision you needed to make for whatever reason, and you made it. This is definitely an issue of needs that need to be before this committee. This committee was elected to be on the school committee. You are the chairperson by virtue of a charter that requires the mayor to sit here as an ex officio officer and chairperson. This committee was elected to do the work of the school department. So I'm suggesting to take the mayor, who you've changed hats twice tonight in conversation about whether you're the chair or the mayor. This motion takes that out of play. This puts this in the hand of me now and down the road, whomever serves in this capacity, to consult with you and the superintendent to craft an agenda and approve an agenda that brings the work that's required for this committee to weigh in on in a public forum. And what's happened now, Mr. Mayor, is that we've had the Talbot Capital Project that was on draft agendas, not put on regular agendas. We had Henry Lord Chillers, who were on draft agendas, not on regular agendas. CPA funding for windows for the ad building, discussed, not put on the agenda. $1 million in healthcare, not on the agenda. The Durfee Chillers, again, tonight we proved it was on the agenda. You took it off because you thought we could use one-time money for capital expense. That's the reason. It has nothing to do with me and your recent decisions. I respect whatever decision you made. I may not agree with it, but I'm not having that conversation here tonight. I think this motion goes a long way to getting the work before this committee that absolutely needs to be addressed, and that's why it's being proposed.
Okay, just again to clarify, I don't disagree, and I think it's a good premise, Mr. Costa, and I think that certainly you don't want things that are not going to be put on the agenda, not on the agenda. However, it is important that I think the process now, the way it works now, is that the superintendent and the mayor has the ability to, and the vice chair, and really any member that wants to weigh in, any member can say, hey, we know the issues that exist at Talbot, at Diamond, at Talbot, at Fonseca, whatever school has an issue with maintenance, you all have the ability to weigh in on that prior to the agenda. However, I think it's a slippery slope, and potentially in the future would not get things done, because the mayor, if he's not weighing in or she is not weighing in on building and crafting the agenda, especially for capital expenses and capital needs, which always have to come from the city side anyway, then the mayor has no obligation and no impetus to actually fund those projects. I think in the way it is now, the mayor sits down with the superintendent and the vice chair and whomever else wants to weigh in on the conversation and works with the financial team to prepare an agenda for items that really can be funded. Some of those items that you mentioned truly cannot be funded right now. And I think that we have to, again, and I'll say it one more time, discuss the $3.4 million that is before this committee and is being transferred for spending on school expenses. So that's my last weigh-in. I think it's really important to consider that. Not for me, but for future mayors and this current mayor, and no matter what, it is very important that the chair crafts the agenda and has the ultimate decision on the agenda, because that money, especially for maintenance and one-time expenses, has to come from the city side. If this committee decides to put, and the vice chair, who is only a school committee member, elected as a school committee member, decides to put on an agenda 10 maintenance items that cannot be funded on the city side, then you're not going to have better government. In fact, you're going to have worse government. Those things will not get done at all. And it politicizes those issues. As opposed to right now, the way the process works is a superintendent and I, as well as the vice chair or whomever, sit down with our financial team and see what ability the city has to fund those one-time maintenance expenses. As has been stated here tonight, we as a body, collectively, have the ability to override the $150,000 for one-time maintenance issues and one-time capital expenditures, which we have $3.4 million to determine. So I think it's very important. I'll go with whatever the committee wants. I'm just giving you my perspective, and I would be remiss if I didn't give that perspective. And you don't have that perspective as a committee because it's the opposite side. I'm giving you this perspective from the city side. If the city and the mayor does not, and I think that's what, in the wisdom of the charter and the way it's written, if the chair doesn't have the ability to say, you know what, we're not going to put this on the agenda today because we don't have the money to fund it, then another person, a vice chair, could put 10 items on there that'll never get funded by the committee. So I
Right,
think
this
that's
is-
really important.
This is not
You can
about the
take
funding
ceremonial-
issue. This
you
is
can take
about whether or not
ceremonial-
the discussion
But you can
occurs.
take ceremonial votes that are never going to get funded, and then those items will never get funded. So I think it's really important to take that consideration. I'm not saying that I disagree. I think let this pass tonight. It's under new business. Let's have a full in-depth discussion on a future agenda. I have no problem doing that, but those are the facts of the situation.
Yeah, and I absolutely respect that, Mayor, and I'm not going to disagree. I still have the floor,
Mr. Martins.
Point of order.
Yes, your point of
Right
order,
at the
please.
present time, grandstanding is taking place.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
Mr. Costa.
To your point, the reason I'm proposing it, Mayor, is that the current situation and the way the agenda is crafted, as you've described, that any member, myself or others, can discuss it with the superintendent and you. That's the current practice. And what I'm suggesting is it's broken. Because if it was how you've described, those items would have been on this agenda. Now, I understand what you're talking about, whether you can afford to pay for some of these things, but the reality is it never gets discussed. And by virtue, we come complicit in you not taking the information and putting it here for us to discuss. So if I was approached by a member of the community who said to me, Mark, what are you doing about the Talbot project? My answer is nothing, because it never came before us for a discussion. In this capacity, I would say we put it on the agenda, we discussed the total cost, we discussed the scope of the project, we discussed it was something that needed to be borrowed long-term by the city. The committee took a vote to ask the administration to look into whether or not they could afford that. That's the work that should be done. Right now, you just sit with your finance team and say, we can't afford it, and we don't have that discussion. And so what I'm saying is that this would take that off the table. This would get information to the committee that we could discuss, and then it would be sent to you. If your administration and your finance team can't afford it, well, that's a separate issue. You could simply come back to this committee and say that the city doesn't have the capacity at this time to pay for that project. But that shouldn't eliminate the discussion from happening. We should still be having those discussions, deciding whether or not there's a need for it, and taking action on it. And I think this accomplishes that, as opposed to the way we have it now, where myself and the superintendent, Attorney Assad, we meet, we say, okay, these are the priorities for the next meeting, this is what we should discuss, it goes to your office, and then there's a decision to remove things that you may feel you can afford or not afford, or the city can afford or not afford, and it doesn't make it back here for us to discuss. And I think this goes a long way to changing that practice so that any item is on the agenda that pertains to what our jobs, duties, and functions are on this school committee. And with that, I yield, and
Like I said, I have no problem putting this on a future agenda to discuss, and if the rules are changed, they're changed. I'm just giving you the other side of it, and I'll give that side again at the future meeting. I think there are legitimate things to think about before taking that vote and changing what has been established by many, 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 many school committees. That's all. So we can take that vote. It's a vote to put it on the future agenda, and we'll take that vote now.
not a future one, the next regular scheduled special meeting or regular scheduled school committee meeting, whichever one comes first.
Subject to
We
the
have
chair's
one on the-
approval of the agenda?
No, it's because it's going to be a vote
I
at
know, I'm
tonight's
kidding,
committee.
I'm
Well,
kidding.
I'll tell you what, if the motion fails, then I'll come back to you and ask you to put it on, but we'll see how that happens.
So, all right. Motion has been made, and there was a second. Mr. Aguirre on the motion?
Yeah, just, so we're voting not for the issue, just to put the issue.
Just to put it on the agenda.
Because I can't even remember what Mr. Costa said to be.
I'll make sure that I submit it to the secretary
Sure,
to get it.
yeah.
So when you get the next agenda that gets approved by the mayor, I'll make sure it's part of the binder, the full motion.
Thank you. My question, though, is for the superintendent on weighing in on what's going on with the agendas. Like, where do you stand on, are you happy with the way things are going? Is there things that you'd want to be put on that are not? Like, where do you stand on this issue?
All right, so let's demystify something. we actually start every 6 months and we plan the agendas in my office. So my team and I, we have a 6-month calendar. You come into the workroom, you see it on the wall, and we've got it plotted out. And we start plugging in all the things that we need to accomplish across the year. We also know in terms of presentations, I can't do in one night 20 presentations because that will take too long in terms of a meeting. So we stagger things, we schedule them, and then the Monday before the school committee meeting, we have a planning meeting with the vice chair, the attorney, and myself, and we go over what we have planned with the other items that have come forward, if there are any, from the members of the committee. We put it all together. The secretary creates a draft document which includes all the things. We talk to the student reps, we get their report, we find out if there's any recognition awards, we look at the superintendent's report, we get all the grants, all the stuff. It's a ton of work that we do to put together a really good agenda. We've had great meetings, so I really think the process works. The process that I've always incorporated, and this is one that the vice chair and Bruce and I and the mayor have worked on. We then, once we have a draft agenda, it gets sent to the mayor's office for final approval. We do that on probably a Wednesday or a Thursday as soon as we can get it out, Tuesday or Wednesday, and then get that back. Once we have the final agenda, we get the agenda books together, and we get those out via courier on Friday to meet the protocols and timelines. In terms of agendas and items, we have policy. Currently, the policy that I've read in the current policy form, it's not clear to me between practice and what the current policy says around how agendas are finalized. So that's one thing, and I've read some of the other urban districts, some of the gateway cities, what their policies say and how agendas get formed. And really, at the end of the day, it's the term around consultation between the three parties, being the vice chair representing the committee, the chair, if it's a mayor, and the superintendent representing the interests of the district that have to get on the table as well.
So has there been things that were taken off that you absolutely wanted on, or is that not the case? Because Mr. Costa's saying there has been, and I haven't heard, for instance, the Talbot issue. Was that an issue for you?
Well, we're ongoing conversations about Talbot, and I actually put pieces of the Talbot need into the $1 million so far in my proposal, which you haven't heard yet because we haven't been able to discuss it tonight. But that Talbot is something that is an ongoing need and we'll continue to focus on. We're going to put some, I would hope that the committee in their wisdom would allow us to put some of that money into Talbot to start the process. The Talbot project is going to cost about $500,000 to $600,000. As you know, when I presented the budget, we had several capital items. We also had safety and security for the entire system, which includes cameras and fobs and technology there. We had the Talbot project, and we had 2 other projects at fixing the egress and entrance at Sylvia and Henry Lord. So those are things that we're trying to get the at least some of the engineering so that the city can say, hey, they got skin in this game too, and hopefully award those as capital projects down the road.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, but you're not gonna.
Because I just... And
I'm better than that.
But I'm not trying to do that. My point to you is that if it's an issue that you as a superintendent have been having, that we can't get things on the agenda, what I would like to add to the discussion as a form of an amendment is the consideration that what the superintendent, who's the CEO of this department, wants on the agenda, he gets on the agenda as a discussion item at the next meeting as well, so that it would take a lot of this off, because what we're talking about tonight was either miscommunication or whatever happened, but I think we got it right in the end. But I'd like to say, as a member of the committee, if you as a superintendent are saying, Ken Pacheco as my director is saying we need this on, that should have been on here tonight. And if we look at that policy now, when we're doing it next meeting, to include that as well, I don't want to limit the scope of it to just that. And we got to figure out a better way to do it because it's obviously not working. But I'm in favor, as I'm just thinking now, to say if the superintendent wants something on the agenda, you should have it on that agenda for the full body because you take your direction from the full body.
Right.
And that's what I would want to have added to the discussion. So I'd like to make a friendly amendment that we add that to that discussion at the next meeting so that we're not in violation of any rules. But I think the whole package of how we do it needs to be on the agenda.
Okay, that's in,
I think, point of information,
on the motion. Is
Right,
there a
I'm-
second on his amendment, first of all?
well, on the
Second.
main motion.
What is
Because-
it?
On the main motion, because just a point of information for my colleague, both those policies that I've outlined will be on the agenda for discussion, so you
And
can
it
make
takes the whole
amendments,
thing in,
changes,
so we could
whatever.
talk about
Yeah,
that.
Absolutely.
Then I yield.
The
that's
whole
what-
policy, both policies.
That's fine,
will
I
be
didn't
done.
want it to be only
No.
pigeonholing us
Just
into
a
a
point of
certain thing.
information, I don't
Got
think it requires an
Great,
amendment.
thank you.
Mr. Coogan?
I would also like to see a copy of that draft. If you emailed it to us as a draft on Monday or whenever it goes out, then if I see something, I can call Matt or Mark or Jazel and say, what are we doing with this, and get an answer. Just so we all get a pop at it before it comes down to us, and then we're ready to roll.
I guess we have to be very careful in that regard around,
Open meeting law.
yeah.
Around what? I
Open
can't hear
meeting
you
law.
over here.
We have to be very careful around the open meeting law violation if there was any deliberation on that stuff. But what I would advise, which is what I always do, the committee, when they call and say, I want something, I put it on the calendar. So we always have that, so that I have it as a place setter to know to put it on.
But what if something's on there and we don't know what it's about, and we call you up and say, what are you doing with Henry Lord and this, what's this number 7B2? What are you talking about? Is that a violation of open meeting?
No,
Okay.
that is not.
Well, that's what I'm saying, if we
No,
see
but
it like
if,
that.
okay, but let's say we sent the committee the draft agenda, and all of a sudden I got a chain of emails. That's not
No, that's not
right.
cool.
So,
Just think about it, because sometimes I was talking to Kevin, I said he wanted to see that $1 million. He's 100% right, but a lot of times when facilities and maintenance do things coming out of their subcommittee,
right.
I don't know what they discussed.
I mean, one of
and
the-
Some
right,
of it I like to
So
keep an
I
eye
would
on,
recommend
too.
at this time, let's put it on the agenda for discussion, and let's discuss it at the next meeting. We're not going to have a full discussion about it under new business. Let's get this into on the next agenda. We'll have a full discussion. We'll prepare our necessary comments. We'll go from there. Let's get to executive session so we can wrap this up. Mr. Marms, you have a closing statement on this?
This is discussion still?
There's discussion on that item, and then we're going to
Okay.
take a vote.
Current policy is sufficient to control the operation of the school committee. I yield.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's take the vote. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Martins?
That was a no.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, roll call, excuse me, is there a motion for executive session?
So moved.
Okay, there's a second? Attorney Assad, can you please read the reasons for executive session, excuse me?
First would be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to review and approve executive session committee minutes for the February 11, 2019 regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee. Second would be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all cafeteria employees of the Fall River School System represented by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 93, Local 1118. As the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the school committee. Third would be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, including Veronica Amorin, data technician. We would reconvene. There may or may not be statements at that time.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel?
Yes.
Mr. Corey?
Yep.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, meeting will come back to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Here.
Mr. Coogan?
Yep.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hetzel?
Here.
Mr. Corey?
Present.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Correa?
Here. Any motions from executive session?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Vice Chair?
motion to approve the executive session committee minutes for February 11, 2019, the regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yep.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions?
Motion to approve the contract between the Fall River School Committee and Miss Veronica Amorin, data technician, as negotiated.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Mr. Martins? Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions this evening?
To adjourn, Mr.
Motion
Chairman.
to adjourn has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler?
Yes.
Mr. Corey? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.